Leading up to the 2022 NFL Draft, it is our official Locked On Broncos final mock draft leading up to the Broncos being on the clock this upcoming Friday. One surprise player fell to the Broncos at 64. This was a no-brainer. Who is that player and who fills out the rest of the 2022 Denver Broncos draft class? You get that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. Both of us, we cover the Denver Broncos for the Locked On Network and 9 News. Broncos country, thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Free and available everywhere you get your podcasts, or whether it's here on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe or that follow button, smash that like button for the algorithm as well. Sayre, my friend, hey, we put our heads together. We came up with our final Denver Broncos mock draft leading up to draft week using Pro Football Network's mock draft simulator. I'm pretty pleased with how the board fell, and I'm eager to see if Broncos country feels the same way as we do.
I'm excited, Cody. I love it. And man, the final mock draft, that's so sad. It's like, man, we've done so many, we've seen so many, and now here we are. It's time for the final one. But you're right, the board fell just so that I feel like we got some really good value in this draft class. And as you can see, I'm pumped. If you're just listening and not watching this on YouTube, man, I've got the Broncos draft hat on. I put on my glasses to look wiser, and I'm sitting here in the Broncos draft room with George Payton just over my shoulder here, and the board just falling just how we wanted it to. So it's exciting, man. I can't wait to share the picks and see what everyone thinks.
Well, let's get into it right here, right now. At round number 2, pick 64, and the Denver Broncos are on the clock. This player was available, and mock draft simulators, they kind of formulate their boards in the final week based on information that's been reported out there. Trey McBride was there, Sayre, and I felt like it was too good of an opportunity for the Broncos to pass up. And what we heard from George Payton last week, we'll take the best player there. At that point where the Broncos were on the clock, Trey McBride was the best player there. We took him at round 2, pick number 64. He's going to be in this offense alongside Russell Wilson, Albert Okwuegbunam. I'm excited about all the potential opportunities here with Trey McBride out of Colorado State. And that's not why we drafted him. He is the best tight end in this year's NFL draft class.
I completely agree with that. Best tight end in this year's draft class, and I've been saying for a really long time, and I think I'll have to eat some crow on this. I may even have to pay up a Chick-fil-A bet on this, Cody. If Trey McBride falls to 64, I didn't think the Broncos would have any chance of getting him all throughout this process. I mean, just looking at this year's tight end class and how McBride plays the game, you feel like he's kind of the unquestioned tight end 1. And there's some people that have other players over him, like Greg Dulcich. I think Daniel Jeremiah ranks him higher, but I feel like Trey McBride is definitely tight end 1 in this class. He's a little bit undersized from what you traditionally will see in tight end 1. He's not a 6'5", 270-pound guy, but he plays like it. He's very physical, and I think that, Dane Brugler's comparison is pretty spot on. He's kind of a souped-up version of Hayden Hurst, a better version, not super dynamic, he says, but a competitive receiver and blocker with reliable focus and urgency that will translate to the NFL game. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is when you see Trey McBride with the ball in his hands, he runs with a purpose. He delivers at the catch point, consistently strong hands, and a really, really effective blocker as well. So I like this pick a lot. I'd be thrilled that the Broncos could get him.
I'm stoked to see what his fit will be inside the Broncos offense. If, in fact, he is the pick, we'll have to wait and see. OTAs, minicamp, everything will be coming up after the NFL draft here for this Denver Broncos team where rookies can get into the facility, learn the playbook, get acclimated. But now we get into round number 3 here, and there are some intriguing options there, but we went with what we felt like was the best defensive player for maybe a position where the Broncos could need a really good player. And once again, we come away with Logan Hall, defensive tackle out of Houston here at round 3, pick number 75. And this is a player, as we've talked about here on the show, he can't just play just a 1-tech. He can play a 1-tech, he can play 2-eye, he can play 3, 4-eye, 5-tech. He can play anywhere there. He's multi-versatile into any scheme. So there is one thing there that I'm excited about with his fit in Denver. I like this pick.
I love this pick, Cody. I think it's a tremendous value. And look, even if Logan Hall is not the guy on the board here, I feel like regardless of what you do at 64, if it's not edge, I think edge could be one of those next two picks up on the radar for the Broncos. But a player like Logan Hall falling, I mean, this would feel like the Broncos getting borderline 2 first-round picks if they were able to draft Trey McBride followed by Logan Hall. Those are two guys that I personally have rated extremely high on my board, top 50 guys. So to be able to get them at 64 and 75, that would kind of feel a lot like last year when the Broncos landed Quinn Miners and Baron Browning in the third round, the later portion of the third round, after there was a ton of talk about, man, Quinn Miners could be the first interior lineman off the board on day 2. And a lot of people thinking he was going in the 40s or 50s. He drops all the way into the 90s. And then Baron Browning, I think everybody on Twitter or wherever would have laughed at you if you said Baron Browning was going to go with the last pick of round 3 like he did. So again, we can talk about the realism of these selections all we want to, but the reality is we have no idea. I mean, Ian Rappaport said there's going to be a lot of guys drafted in the first round that some teams have on the third round of their board, and vice versa. Some guys getting picked in the third that other teams are like, hey, we have a first round grade on that guy. This is kind of where Logan Hall is to me. I would say he's a first round borderline graded player who can play all over your D-line and even stand up off the edge and give you versatile value all over that defensive front.
I'm liking this next pick, too, because round 3, pick number 96, the Broncos, they get an insurance policy behind KJ Hamler, and that is by taking Memphis wide receiver Calvin Austin III at the receiver position. Now, I think that one thing we looked at, too, like with KJ Hamler and how we envision him in this Broncos offense, we just recently talked about him on Locked On Broncos, too, by the way, but you look at a guy like Calvin Austin, if anything goes on with KJ or KJ's not ready, or if something happens to him, you have a guy who can play the role that KJ does here. What are your thoughts here on why we made this pick?
I think absolutely insurance for KJ Hamler is one reason. And we also heard in George Paton's pre-draft press conference, I mean, they're looking for a return specialist. And I think Calvin Austin can absolutely be that guy for you, and a dynamic option at that. So not only do I think he presents a great weapon for your offense, he's really just a absolutely explosive playmaker at the wide receiver position. Even though he's smaller, Cody, we saw at the Senior Bowl, I mean, he's capable of doing a lot of different things for you. And in today's NFL, I think size matters less and less, unless you're talking about injuries being a factor, which that's a valid point. The size doesn't necessarily matter as much for these guys being able to make an impact in modern NFL offenses. So I personally would love this pick. I think that the Broncos need another option at wide receiver. There's been some steam picking up. I don't know if you've noticed this, but since we had our podcast on this, I'm not saying we were the catalyst, but since we talked about on our podcast, wide receiver maybe being a sleeper pickup for the Broncos early in the 2022 NFL draft, there's been some actual steam picking up towards that being a thing. I know Mike Kliss, 9 News Insider, he talked about wide receiver being an option at 64. So even if the Broncos don't go Calvin Austin at a pick like number 96, I think wide receiver with those top 3 picks is something to keep on the radar.
What are the Denver Broncos doing rounds 4 and 5 of our final Denver Broncos mock draft here in the Locked On Broncos podcast? Sayre, Bedinger, and myself, we're going to share our picks coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode of the show. It's our good friends over there, Athletic Greens, and I use AG1 every single morning. I wake up first thing in the morning, empty stomach, fill up 12 ounces of cold water and 1 scoop of 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens that'll help me start my day right every single day. And this special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, focus, and aging. All of those things combined in one. And with AG1, right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every single day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NFL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. As we get into rounds 4 and 5 of the 2022 NFL Mock Draft, the final one here, courtesy of the Locked On Broncos podcast. Real quick, mile high salute. Major shout out to everybody in Broncos country. Thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Both Sayre, Bedinger, and myself, we appreciate everybody in Broncos country for the continued support and their interaction here on this show. All right, Sayre. Hey, getting into rounds 4 or 5, this is a lot of the meat and the bones, right? The meat and the potatoes that we look at here for the NFL Draft when it comes to depth and special special teams contributors. And, for us, I think looking at how the board has fallen for Denver, there were a multitude of different positions that were open. And the Broncos, they have 3 picks within rounds 4 and 5 combined here. Round 4, pick number 115. We selected Damari Mathis, cornerback out of Pitt here. Now, Dane Brugler had a lot of great things to say about Damari Mathis here, saying Mathis, aggressive demeanor. He can be a double-edged sword at times and work against him, but he is smart, he's speedy, he's competitive, which is an easy sell in draft meetings, and he can play man coverage, he can play zone coverage, and will push for early NFL playing time if he develops better discipline in coverage. And also for him, too, he's 5'11". He's got a 9.72 RAS score. He's got long arms, which is great for combating the high catch point and also being able to jam wide receivers. The discipline stuff, the teaching stuff can come. And I think that's one thing we got out of George Paton's presser. He said, hey, we're going to take the most talented player there. And it's not about like what they can do right away. It's about what they can learn. And we've seen that. I mean, this is a guy who's in a position. He's not necessarily going to start right away in 2022. So he will learn. He'll be able to get valuable reps in practice and maybe be a key special teams contributor, covering the gunners on the outside and punt return.
And I think the Broncos need that desperately. I mean, their special teams, they talked about it at the pre-draft press conference. I mean, it was bad last year, just kind of all around, other than the kickers. I mean, Brandon McManus and Sam Martin were fine, but the special teams coverage units were bad. The return game was bad. And I feel like that's got to be addressed. So getting a guy like this who, yeah, he has some starting potential. I feel like, he's got a good athletic makeup. He's got good size. You love to hear about the aggressiveness. You also love the track record that Ejiro Evero and his staff with the Los Angeles Rams had of just developing, whether it was, Jalen Ramsey bringing his game to the next level or taking guys like Darius Williams, undrafted players, and making them into really quality NFL starters. And they did that both at corner and safety. So yeah. I like Damari Mathis at the 4th round range here. I feel like that's a really good spot for the Broncos to take a corner. Even though they could go corner higher, I feel like this is a good spot to take advantage of a pretty deep class of defensive backs in general, and I like the fit here for sure.
So now at pick number 116, the Broncos have back-to-back picks here in round number 3. Round number 4, who is the other player that the Broncos selected? Because, we look at the offensive lineup. Who knows how that lineup is going to shake out, but we give Broncos fans that commented on our previous mock draft, we give them an offensive tackle here and one who does have some elite athletic traits to him in Braxton Jones, offensive tackle out of Southern Utah.
I like this pick a lot, Cody. I mean, I could see the Broncos going, just like any of these positions. Offensive tackle could be very high on the priority list, but George Paton mentioned this. These picks don't have to come in and be day one contributors, and that's where I think that you maybe look towards not necessarily just all developmental projects, but maybe certain guys who, hey, this guy needs some seasoning. Let's get him with our coaching staff. Let's try to maximize his potential. And Braxton Jones, I mean, he's kind of a freakish guy with his length. Like Ian Cummings of Pro Football Network mentioned in his scouting report, violent, snappy hands. He's got quickness. He's got a high RAS score. He's got everything that you look for in terms of the traits. And coming from Southern Utah, he's obviously got some highlight reel type tape out there. He's going to dominate guys at that level when you're this big, this strong, this quick, just kind of a freak athlete among other, maybe not necessarily freaks, but he stands out for sure. So I think as far as a developmental tackle goes, this guy fits the exact bill of what the Broncos need to do in this year's draft.
Well, going down to round 5, pick number 152, we had thought about running back, and there were some intriguing options there. But when we boiled it down and we looked to, okay, who would maybe be the best scheme fit for what the Broncos want to do? Who'd be the best player for them? Pierre Strong Jr., running back out of South Dakota State. So a smaller school there, but he has some athletic traits to him. Obviously a 4.3 40-yard dash. Now also another thing too from Dane Brugler mentions here, he's strong, doesn't have the ideal build or contact balance, which might limit his pro ceiling, but he runs with speed, tempo, and controlled feet. And he does have a tendency to put himself on the line in pass protection, which, hey, that is a good thing. But it goes back to what George Paton said. Most running backs in any class, and even in this year's draft class, aren't very good at pass protection, but it's something that they can learn. And I think that's going to be very critical for, obviously, the new running back coach, too, for the Broncos to be able to mix him in there with Javonte Williams, potentially Mike Boone, maybe Demarie Crockett. Who knows how it goes? But this is a good pick here. You're getting kind of that smash and dash combination if he does become the number 2 back there alongside Javonte Williams.
Absolutely. Absolutely. New running backs coach Tyrone Wheatley. I think he would love this pick, Cody. I really do. I feel like he would be jumping for joy to get an opportunity to coach up a guy like this who, again, we're talking about rare physical traits at the running back position with sub 4.4 speed and just a huge proven track record of production at South Dakota State. And yes, it is a smaller school, but you know what? There's a lot of good talent coming from these smaller school programs these
Yep.
days. And South Dakota State has really improved in terms of putting out NFL caliber guys, Dallas Goedert probably being the most notable among them. But yeah, Pierre Strong, I think, is a great fit in the 5th round here for the Broncos. They got to get a running back in this draft, Cody, maybe 2. I love Pierre Strong at this juncture, though, just because I feel like the ceiling that he has, he presents a really great value, especially in a zone, an outside zone type of offense where he can plant his foot in the ground and just get upfield. And I think, like you mentioned, very willing in pass protection, very capable 3rd down back as far as a receiver goes. I think even his small school status, that could give a team like the Denver Broncos a nice steal on day 3 of the draft.
What even mentions here, he has potential as a 3rd down or committee back in the right situation. Has a feeling that Denver might be that right situation, at least on paper, theoretically speaking. We'll see if it kind of pans out that way. But with round 6 and 7, who do the Denver Broncos pick? And Sayre, I can only summarize round 6 and 7 as some luxury picks here for this Broncos football team. Luxury in the later rounds? What are they talking about? You'll find out coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about the other sponsor. Today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. It's our good friends over there at Built Bar. And as you all know it, ladies and gentlemen, Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar that's out there on the market today. The bars contain 170 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 4 grams of sugar. Make sure you check it out today at built.com. Check out the 9 amazing original flavors, plus the occasional limited time flavor offers like the puffs that you can get exclusively at built.com. If you need a little bit of extra fuel to get yourself through your day, Built Bar is the perfect pick-me-up to give you a little bit of push through your workout, through your afternoon at work, whatever you have going on. Built Bar is always there. Not to mention, you can get 15% off your first order today by going to built.com and using promo code LOCK15. Once again, promo code LOCK15 gets you 15% off your next order at built.com. As we jump into the 4th quarter action on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, real quick, Broncos country. Once again, thank you so much for making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Don't forget to check out the live Locked On NFL Draft special this week on the Locked On NFL YouTube channel on the 28th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Everything begins. You get the local experts on the biggest stories coming in, reacting to the picks that their teams make. You get that in one beautiful extravaganza, the Locked On NFL live draft special on the YouTube channel, Locked On NFL. Be sure to check it out this week. We'll be making an appearance if the Broncos jump on in round 1 somehow, some way. We'll figure it out. But Sayre, let's get into round 6 and 7 here. For the Broncos, really at the back end, a lot of times these are the picks that have, I think, potential to grow into something special, right? We felt the same way about Seth Williams last year for the Denver Broncos. Well, with round number 6, pick number 206, this was a luxury pick, just plain and simple. The fact that he was there, we took Danny Gray, SMU wide receiver here. This is a luxury pick. Now, for Danny Gray, he averaged 16.4 yards per catch. He had 9 touchdowns in 2021 alone. He's an impact player, and obviously the SMU connection. It would be great for Cortland Sutton to bring in a guy from SMU and mentor him in the National Football League. But like for how the board fell and like the players that are available, Sayre, I couldn't help but pass up on this. And I know you and I were debating like, hey, this is really weird that he's here, but let's take him.
I think in those situations, they present themselves during the NFL draft. So you got to be ready in case something like this does happen. So I think obviously Danny Gray, a luxury pick at this point. But again, you're trying to collect players at positions that have high value in today's NFL. And Danny Gray with 4.33 speed, Cody, I mean, you bring him and a guy like Calvin Austin into the wide receiver room, and now you're talking about just a whole dynamic just set of players at this position, including Seth Williams from last year's class. So I think you have to give yourself a lot of options at this position because like we saw last year, the toll that injuries can take can be severe throughout the year. Again, I'll remind everybody listening, John Brown and David Moore played significant regular season snaps for the Denver Broncos last year. And why is that? Well, the depth obviously wasn't where it needed to be. Even with the top 4 players the Broncos have, depth is something that you have to consider at receiver because there's 3 on the field pretty much all the time. So I think you got to have 6 or 7 in today's NFL to really thrive. And I like this pick, even though it feels like a bit of a luxury.
Well, let's get to round number 7 now here. Round 7, pick 232. We took Tariq Carpenter, safety out of Georgia Tech. He's already had a pre-draft visit with this Denver Broncos football team. But you mentioned here in Dane Brugler's notes on him, Carpenter is a hybrid defender who might struggle to find a permanent home on defenses, but his ability to be a four-phase special team player gives him a fighting chance to make an NFL roster. Like, he's the thumper. Like, he's got durability at the college level. He's played over 2,000 career snaps, which is admirable, and he's played over 800 of them inside the box or inside the slot, as noted in his scouting report here, Sayre. So for him, this isn't necessarily a move that's like, hey, okay, he's going to come in and he's going to replace anybody. He's going to fight for a starting spot. No, this is more so depth, but this is special teams, because what did George Paton say last week? We need really good special teamers. We need better special teamers, because last year we weren't very good in that department. And Dwayne Stukes, he's going to want some guys. And this is where Dwayne Stukes has a chance to really build his war tool. I mean, his war chest in a sense for special teams here. And he'd be a great guy to have consideration there. As we mentioned, a core 4 guy.
Core 4, you got to have good special teams players. And for anybody that's kind of wondering, well, where's the linebacker from this mock draft? Well, like you mentioned, Cody, I mean, this guy played a little linebacker. He played a little in the slot. He played some free safety. He can do a little bit of everything for you. But I think if the Broncos really feel the need to go and get a starting linebacker in this draft, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you do prioritize it. But I feel like there's some good linebackers still in free agency, including Alexander Johnson, who, hey, maybe you bring Alexander Johnson back on a 1-year deal after the draft, depending on how the board falls, especially if it falls like this. But I think Tariq Carpenter in the 7th round, a nice fit and a value, a good athlete, a guy that could play for Dwayne Stukes special teams right away.
Well, let's get to our final pick here. Round 7, pick number 234. This was kind of a luxury pick as well, because when you look at how the board fell, edge rusher was an area we didn't necessarily add anybody in this year's NFL draft prior, but Christopher Allen, edge rusher out of Alabama, could be the steal of the edge rushers in this year's NFL draft. Only played in 1 game last season for Bama, suffered a foot injury, but could be an impact player here, Sayre. It's not a risk taking him here with pick number 234, your final pick in round number 7. This could be a potential steal here for the Broncos.
Definitely low risk, high reward. I mean, similar to kind of what we saw with Jonathan Cooper last year, right? I mean, when the Broncos got Jonathan Cooper, I think everybody was kind of like, wow, he was still on the board. Yeah, why is he there? Christopher Allen, similar type of deal. He only played 1 game this past year at Alabama, but man, his prior production and the fact that in that 1 game he had a sack, he had a forced fumble, I think he's on track to becoming a potential starting edge at some point. So could we see him go much higher than the 7th round? Absolutely. But could the injury also push him down to the 7th? Also very possible. The staffs of respective teams, they didn't get to see him work out before the draft. So you got to trust your medical eval on this guy. But I think the sky's the limit here, man. And you get an edge rusher in the 7th round with some good athletic traits. I feel like that can help you on special teams as well. So it's not only a high upside in terms of the pass rush, but it's high upside in terms of immediate contributions in that phase of the game.
Oh, the Broncos medical staff is doing their due diligence on every prospect, according to George Paton and Darren Muji. We'll see how it all pans out this week when the Denver Broncos are on the clock at pick number 64 on Friday. We'll see where things lie for this Denver Broncos football team going into the 2022 NFL Draft. How accurate will Sayre and I's final mock draft be? Well, we hope that we're on the spot there. If we can hit on at least 50% of the picks, we'll be very excited about that. But Broncos country, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Broncos, free and available everywhere you get your podcast. Also, here on YouTube, make sure you check out, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you smash that like button for the algorithm, and we look forward to your comments down below. What did you think of this mock draft? Let us know. Sayre and I will be back for a brand new episode of the show. Tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos.